So I don't want to achieve $1 million by making myself anxious. I want to achieve $1 million in a way that is peaceful. So if I get feedback that I'm not engaging in a way that's peaceful, then I want to use that feedback so that I can make the adjustment so that I can be peaceful in the process. One last thing I'll say about this, and I've already kind of hinted at this, but it's also about the importance of action, because sometimes people will say to me, "Oh, well, do I need to do anything? Isn't it enough that I'm just imagining what I want?" The answer to that is, well, imagining what you want is an action, so there's that much. And then there's also that uh, you're always engaged in action at all levels, so there's always action taking place. Sometimes people try and artificially restrain action, and that's no good. So that leads to all kinds of complications. It's a kind of constipation, which is problematic. So I do not recommend restraining action, at least for the most part. There may be some situations in which it's the best thing that you can do to avoid doing something that would be very problematic for you. Like, if you have a strong impulse to enact needless violence and you don't know what else to do, then I guess temporarily restraint of that action is useful, but not as a long-term strategy. It's important to get clear on what you want instead and to start to move yourself in that direction. So, asking yourself, what do I want instead of anger? Maybe you want peace, maybe you want harmony, and then to actually start to move in that way, in that direction, versus just trying to restrain things. Restraint of action, restraint of impulses, for the most part, it's certainly not something that I would advocate trying to rely on as a main strategy for success in life. I think it's very problematic, but a lot of people make that mistake. So they just, again, are focused on what they don't want. So they say, well, I should restrain myself from these certain actions because I think these actions are incompatible with what I want, or they're bad or wrong. Somebody told me that they're wrong. My religion told me that they're wrong, or my mom told me that they're wrong, or society told me that they're wrong. And so I'm going to restrain myself. And I'll give you an example of this. So like for a long time, in I had gotten it in my mind that any kind of sexual desire or sexual impulse was bad and needed to be restrained, and that was problematic. So the problem is sometimes those kinds of things will come out as they're descriptions of something that naturally occurs, and then they're given as prescriptions. So like there may be a description that um, at a certain point in their spiritual evolution, for some people, there may be a transformation in the sexual desires and impulses. And it depends on the person and their path and all kinds of things. But that could be the case in some cases. But then that's a description, not a prescription. But then it's given as a prescription. Like, well, if you want to be like that person, then suppress your sexual impulses. But it won't work. If it doesn't occur naturally in you, then trying to suppress that will only lead to a kind of constipation. It will not lead to being like that person. It will actually have the opposite effect. It will be very, very problematic. So, so action is unavoidable. You're always involved in action, and so at all levels, there's action taking place, and people want to know, well, should I take action? Should I not take action? That's, I think, the wrong question. Like I said, you're always taking action. Better questions would be, how are you taking action? Are you taking action in ways that are congruent with your values? So again, back to this question, if you value peace, and I'm not saying you should, I'm just saying if you value peace, are you taking the actions that you are taking, are you taking them in peaceful ways? If so, that's great. If not, then there's the problem. It's not the actions in and of themselves that are the problem. So when people at a gross level, they'll say, well, if I have a desire for $1 million, should I just be visualizing that I have the $1 million, and should I avoid taking any action in the outer world that would be congruent with my idea of how that might look? That's the wrong question. Again, you're always taking action. It's not a matter of should you or should you not take action. It's the question is, how are you taking that action? So when a person asks that question, then what I suspect is most likely the case is that they have limited ideas about what kinds of actions and how those actions could be taken. So they might say, I have a desire for $1 million. And the only kinds of actions that I could imagine and the only ways that I could imagine taking those actions would be uh, incompatible with my values. So then they're thinking, well, it's a binary. Either I can take those actions, which would be the only way I could imagine that would be misery, or I could not take those actions. But then they're also probably thinking, but I can't imagine how I would achieve my goal without taking those actions. So they put themselves into this artificial bind where they say the only possible actions and the only way to do those actions is X. And so therefore, I can either take those actions and be miserable, or I could not take those actions and I'm pretty sure I will not achieve my goal. Well, that's artificial. And that's why I'm proposing don't you're always taking actions. It's not a matter of whether you will take action or not. Like you're going to eat, you're going to breathe, these things will happen. You will say things, you will go somewhere, you will walk somewhere, you will exchange money for something, you will do something. You can't avoid it. A better question is how will you take those actions and take those actions in ways that are compatible with your values. And then you can use that as part of the same feedback loop that will allow you to continually make progress in the direction of what you want. So then you don't have to have this useless debate about will you take action or not. It's you can actually be much more productive and constructive by again asking yourself, how will I take the actions that I will take, whatever those actions may be? Like as I'm breathing, because it's almost unavoidable that I will breathe. In what way will I breathe? Will the way that I breathe be compatible with my values or not? Because if you're instead focused on, oh, should I take outer actions to achieve my goal of making $1 million or not, then you're overlooking the way in which you're taking all the actions you are taking because you are breathing, you are eating, you are talking, you are thinking. Thinking is also an action. You're doing all of these things. And are you taking those actions in ways that are compatible with your values? If not, which probably is not optimized, then that would be a much better place to focus your attention rather than on should I be taking action or not. Hopefully that's clear.